This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we end today's show looking at the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. On Thursday, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress and warned nuclear threat posed by North Korea. On Wednesday, Joe Biden pledged to deploy nuclear-armed submarines to South Korea for the first time in 40 years and to establish a new bilateral nuclear consultative group where the United States would involve officials from South Korea in nuclear planning operations targeting North Korea. On Wednesday, President Biden issued a stark warning to North Korea.
Look, a nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies or partisans or partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of whatever regime were to take such an action.
President Biden was speaking in the Rose Garden at a news conference with the South Korean president to talk more about his visit to Washington and tension on the Korean Peninsula. We're joined now by Christine Ahn, founder and executive director of Women Cross DMZ, a global movement of women mobilizing to end the Korean War. Christine is also the coordinator of the campaign Korea Peace Now, speaking to us from Hawaii. And we thank you for being up in the middle of the night for this conversation, Christine. Talk about the significance of the meeting at the White House between the U.S. and South Korean presidents and what President Biden has promised.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me on. The announcement that the U.S. would send nuclear-armed submarines to South Korea is a very provocative and dangerous move. It's the first time that U.S. nuclear weapons have been on or around the Korean Peninsula in 40 years. In fact, most Americans have no idea that the nuclear crisis actually began with the U.S. bringing nuclear weapons in South Korea from 1956, 3 years after the signing of the ceasefire, and had them there up until George Bush Sr. So that is not only a provocative act directed at North Korea, but also at China. And this is actually throwing fuel into a fire that has been increasingly dangerous. There have been massive military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea this spring, all last year. Last year, I think North Korea conducted 90 missile tests. And the situation is just getting even more dangerous. There is a three-star general, Dan Leaf, who says of all the conflicts currently taking place right now, whether it's between U.S. and China over Taiwan or the Russia-Ukraine war, that the Korean Peninsula is perhaps the one that may be the closest to a nuclear war. So it is a very dangerous moment, and the fact that the U.S. will be sending U.S. nuclear submarines to the Korean Peninsula, and for Biden to make such a statement that is akin to Trump's fire and fury era, where he threatened to totally destroy North Korea. This is a wake-up call, I think, for the American people, and obviously for South Koreans who feel that Yoon is basically drawing the Korean Peninsula on the front line of the U.S. war against China.
Well, Christine Ahn, this actually is being billed as a compromise. As part of the agreement, President Yoon renewed a pledge not to pursue the development of a South Korean nuclear arsenal. Your response?
Well, it is in the sense that there is growing concern in South Korea for its own domestic nuclear weapons program in light of the tactical nuclear weapons coming from North Korea, or the program in North Korea. But I think the problem is it's not addressing the underlying issue, which is that the Korean Peninsula is continually at a state of war. This is actually the 70th anniversary of the ceasefire. This July 27th marks 70 years that the U.S. commander, the North Korean commander, and the Chinese representative from the Voluntary People's Army signed the armistice agreement, where they committed to halting the war, but they never actually followed up with their commitment, which was to return within 90 days to negotiate a peace settlement. So what we're facing is this continual militarization. South Korea now is the 6th largest military spender in the world. The U.S., we know, is the world's largest. Our budget approaching $1 trillion, more than the next 9 countries combined. And it is an unsustainable crisis. And I think the way that the narrative of deterrence is as if there isn't violence, as if they are preparing to prevent violence in the future, when in fact we know violence is taking place right now, whether it's the division of families, whether it's the suffering of the North Korean people, whether it's the ongoing investment in militarization that should be otherwise invested in things that make us secure. I mean, I think about, I'm here in Hawaii, and we're facing the Red Hill crisis, where this militarization means we are polluting Oahu's aquifer. And this is the jet fuel that will basically fuel the ships or the bombers that will go and wage wars in Asia. So we have to break down this mythology that this is actually what is making us secure, when in fact what we need to do is negotiate a peace agreement. And that is gaining traction among people, from the military to nuclear scientists to people like President Carter. We have to normalize relations with North Korea to achieve the things that we want.
Can you talk about this mobilization to end the Korean War scheduled for the end of July, and also talk about China's response to all of this?
Well, first, just since we're short on time, I want to make sure that we are mobilizing hundreds to come to Washington, D.C. I hope, Amy, you will be there, or somebody from Democracy Now! But July 27th marks the 70th anniversary of the armistice. And we are saying it's time to end this war that inaugurated the military-industrial complex for the United States. It set forth the U.S. to become the world's police. And it has been the war that has maintained this constant threat on the Korean Peninsula. So we are gathering multiple organizations, faith-based, Vets for Peace, and Korean American Coalition. So we are gathering. The website is koreapeaceaction.org. And we'll be having a congressional briefing with our peace champions. We want to also raise awareness that there is the first ever Peace on the Korean Peninsula Act. It was reintroduced by Brad Sherman in the last Congress. We had nearly 50 co-sponsors of that bill.
We have 10 seconds, Christine.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, Amy, there is momentum now to transform this state of war into a permanent peace. And that's where we need Americans to recognize this is America's oldest war. It's on our responsibility to bring closure to this war.
Christine Ahn, founder and executive director of Women Cross DMZ, a global movement of women mobilizing to end the Korean War. Also the coordinator of the campaign, Korea Peace Now. That does it for our show. On Saturday, Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez will be speaking at 10 a.m. at American University in Washington on an all-day conference titled In Search of a New U.S. Policy for a New Latin America, Burying 200 Years of the Monroe Doctrine. Check democracynow.org for details. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.